Hello and welcome. My name is Piers, CEO of RDX Works, and today I'm joined by the CTO, Russell Harvey, the CPO, Matthew Hine, and the CSO, Adam Simmons. Now, today we've got a load of questions for the Radix Roundtable. We're going to be covering 6 nice beefy topics and sort of giving our thoughts and opinions on the things that the community have been putting to us. And the main purpose of this is basically to spend a bit more time deep diving into some of these topics that maybe just don't work so well just over sort of on a message board or on Telegram or whatever. So question 1, nice good question to start with. What are you most looking forward to in Q1? Let's start with Russell.
This is an easy one, which is the new transaction model. We're going to showcase this on Alexandria for Scrypto and RAV2, which we've been teasing quite a bit, but it's one of these things that's much easier to talk about once you can concretely show how it works. So that is coming this quarter. I'm actually, we're targeting before the end of February for that to come out, at which point we'll be able to show how the transaction layer, as of Alexandria and Babylon, is a whole fully powerful layer in of itself. And we can start to show you how you can do interesting composability among arbitrary components and how every transaction is in fact a composed thing of multiple components coming together.
And like as a developer who's trying to build on Radix, why should I care about that? What does that an extra thing give me that I don't currently have with Alexandria at the moment?
It's the complete flexibility to combine anything you want at will, and to also, without going down to Scrypto code, to do things like put assertions around, at this conclusion of this, I need to make sure at least 55 XRD is present, otherwise abort the whole thing. And I don't care whether the components I'm calling actually specified that rule or not. I'm able to introduce my own rules into any transaction,
right? So,
which is one of the things that we've talked about in the white paper before, and people were quite excited about. We can now show you the beginnings of how it works.
So it's making transactions a lot more intelligent.
Yeah, I think people are going to be
intelligent, safer, easier to understand. Go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, just for people that are familiar with like the Ethereum transaction model, it's going to be, I think it's going to be a like open up the back of your mind sort of experience of like what these things can do. And you haven't really gotten the feel for it yet, because right now we've got this command line simulator that kind of lets you do the basic thing of like, all right, feed some stuff into this component, get a result. But when you actually see what a transaction looks like, you'll get an idea of how much more asset oriented it is and how much more transparent and expressive it is than what people are used to in the crypto space.
Awesome. Well, since you're speaking, Matt, what are you looking forward to this quarter?
Transaction model. No, we're going to come up with something else that is really cool. I've been playing with this on the weekends. There's a lot of, now that Alexandria's out, there's a lot of interesting developer activity stuff that we can now start ramping up around. Like now that we have the tool set, now it's about really starting to build the community around that. So it's exciting that this is going to be the beginning of some of those programs. People have seen that we've got a developer community liaison, Clement, he's been around. You'll definitely see his name on the channels, and he's been putting together some interesting proposals for this. We've been talking to some third parties. Like, I want to get the specifics, but pretty soon here in first quarter, you're going to see the first developer programs of encouraging people to come in, to build stuff, to experience Scrypto. There's going to be some competitions. There's a lot of educational material that we're putting together. You can see the base of that already in the documentation that I think is going pretty well, but we're building up more and more material that we can use as a basis for more of these programs. So I think by the end of first quarter, you're going to see the beginnings of, not just sort of, we publish Scrypto and people talk about it on social channels, but a little bit more of an active outreach to the community.
That's awesome. And Adam?
Well, I was pretty lucky because the thing I'm most looking forward to in Q1 has already been delivered, which is the new network and core API and gateway API service. So other than the obvious, that this means that the wallet and Explorer should consistently be faster, more responsive, as we said in the Radix report, and hopefully everyone's seeing firsthand now. It also means that integrations, especially for, say, like exchanges, is now far easier than it was before, which opens up a lot of interesting conversations for me and my team that we can start looking at. And I know that it's something that we can also look at more deeply about strategically. How does this fit in? So when we're talking about things like mobile wallets or other applications, actually how do these integrations look? When do they make sense for both the Radix ecosystem and also for third parties? Because as Matt often says, this is about building a movement, not a flash mob. So sometimes being open and transparent with partners about when is the right time to integrate these things and what work and what benefits can come out of them really allows us to not only commit our own resources to the right places at the right time for maximum impact, but allows partners to as well.
Cool.
And Piers, what's yours?
Yeah, for myself, it's people, right? Like we're growing the business quickly. We're now at RDX Works is now at 42 team members. We'll probably be at 65 by end of Q1, Q2 time. We'll go everyone will be meeting a new member of our team, our new chief marketing officer on the next Radix roundtable, which is going to be great. It's amazingly intelligent, capable, curious people that this space sort of brings in, and the number of incredible people that we've managed to bring into the team and get working on this vision it is genuinely humbling and mind-blowing to have so many amazing people all together and just see how magic happens when you put all those people in a room. So it's a long-term investment in future tech, but it's already feeling really like it's picking up momentum, and I'm really excited to see how the company's going to continue to grow around those people we're bringing in.
It's like nothing I've ever seen. The quality of candidates we're getting in is it's mind-blowing. It's like, knock on wood. So I'm nervous at how good our candidates are. So and how great the recent hires have been.
Wasn't our talent team had something like 100 applications to one role in a week or something crazy?
Yeah, it's been great. But that's not always an indication of quality. But the people that have joined and have got up the curve have been amazing. Okay, so question 2. What is RDX Labs and how does it relate to the roadmap? Will we see Dan's work? So Dan's building a research network called Cassandra. Will we see Dan's work play a greater role in Radix marketing going forwards? Why not? I think the first thing I'll preface is just sort of some of the community, some of the comments around this have been selling the dream future of the Radix network and what it could potentially do, and how Dan's research sort of does that. What we're focused on is decentralized finance, and Matt will cover later on this all of the things that decentralized finance is good for, and we think that is a $400 trillion opportunity at least, and that there's a huge amount of value just in focus in an organization, in a product set, etc. What Dan's research started off as being was entirely closed. So he was sitting in his coding cave building his research, and then there was questions as to what Dan was doing. And so what we did is we just, Dan and the team decided it would be a good idea to start talking about and showing these research networks on the understanding that it is very much just demonstrating what Dan is working on and playing around with. The next level of that is sometimes Dan builds things to test the theories that he has in terms of stress testing the network. So could be stress testing consensus, could be stress testing the state model, could be stress testing throughput. Now, because it's visible to people, sometimes you want to take things that are sort of readily recognizable, like Twitter or like Netflix or whatever. However, these are not directionally strategic for what the purpose of the public ledger is. So you this is where you start to diverge between product strategy and testing, where you're going, okay, well, the easiest way of me testing, the state model being able to deal with large amounts of data availability is stick a load of video material on top of the ledger. However, you're never going to be putting video material on top of a DeFi network, because there is a load of extra economics and theory and stuff that, in terms of optimization, things that are good for financial transaction systems and things are good for like a CDN or whatever. So it's really important that we are able to continually create this very different separation between what the strategic focus of the public ledger is, what the strategic focus of the research is, and how the research is not actually directional on what the product application of the public ledger is going to be. And so it's not even directional of what we expect the network to be doing or what the primary purpose of the network is going to be. It's just a great way of testing in a way that people can follow along to and go, wow, this is awesome, of the research that Dan is doing, which is awesome. But also it is important that those two things are kept separate. Russ, did you have something that you wanted to talk about with regards to the difference between a test network and a beta network and a production network?
Sure. I mean, I think you've covered pretty well the reason why the subjects that Dan tackles are so different than what the product goals are. And the other part I'll add to it is just that a lot of these things it's exploring the edges of a space. It's not intended to be, for a production network, of course, you have availability must be perfect. You must be handling all the weird edge cases and attack vectors and things like this that in a research network, you can focus on one or two problems you're trying to look at this moment and then say, these other things I don't care about at this point in time. And I'm just going ahead to try to prove out a concept or a theory. And we get a lot of great empirical data on moving beyond just we know that the math works at a white paper level on a thing. But that doesn't always mean you can get to an implementation that actually functions in the real world. And so the research networks let us actually prove out, yes, you can get a working implementation of this idea. And in doing so, you discover, here's the things that actually were harder than we expected or will need more thinking to implement them. And so basically, Dan's out there making sure that even if you turn the dial all the way up to 11 on the difficulty of, say, data throughput, that a solution exists in the sharded world that will meet it. And then we will, of course, then adapt that thinking into the actual production network that comes.
Yeah. Are we going to do anything in terms of highlighting what Dan's doing?
So I can speak a bit to that. So obviously, Dan is doing a huge amount of content already going out on his Twitch streams, on his Twitter, about what's going on. And one of the things that we're really conscious of is that, as you said, Piers and Russell as well, when you're explaining research, especially to a broad audience, it's important to make sure that it's clear what is actually exciting about it, what it means, and for a technical audience, what it shows. But it's good to set that expectation right so that people know what are the things about it that are so revolutionary. So we're doing two things at the moment. One is working on a lab's website, probably a subdomain, which will make clear some of these things we've spoken about on what Cassandra as a research network is there to do, and also what it's not there to do, as well as do some things similar to what we've done with kind of like the Radix knowledge base, learn.radix DLT, but for Radix Labs, and explaining kind of different things of highlight with a bit more context, especially for those who are more technically minded to understand what's really being done there.
Cool. Okay. So there's going to be more information available for those who want to take it, but there's some key considerations around marketing to make sure that we're not confusing the message as to what the Radix public ledger is actually being built for. Okay, so next question is, the new APIs have been released. Any news on mobile wallets or other third-party integrations?
So from my side, as I said at the start, like we are always open to conversations, be that from anyone who's wanting to integrate the Radix public network, so exchanges, wallets, other third parties, and looking at how they're able to provide value to the Radix ecosystem, which is sometimes really, really obvious. But it's also important for the long-term health of our strategic roadmap and our partnerships to make sure that we're honest with them about what we're going to be providing to their side and the right time they should allocate their resources. Just in the same way that we wouldn't want people stringing us along, we would want to string other parties along. And so while the new API has definitely made integration far easier and better in many ways for these third parties, it's got to make sense. And that's why when things do really make sense, like, for example, the ledger, having a hardware wallet and ledger support, we push really hard for that. We put a lot of resources behind it. We make it really good. It's why when exchanges have come to us before, like we have had this new API planned to make it better for them so that it can be supported more easily. And also the overhead on our side is a lot more manageable, and doesn't take resources away from delivering this ambitious roadmap that we have. And so there's definitely conversations going on. Like even when I was at CES recently, like there's an awesome mobile wallet company there that I'm speaking to. So there's always things going on. It's just about what makes sense and what fits in, not only strategically, but from a technical and product standpoint as well.
Yeah. I mean, the thing I'd say on that as well is like, of course, we're talking to all of our exchange partners, and of course, we're talking to new exchange partners as well. That happens all of the time because we understand how strategically they're important are to the network. The thing I will expectation set on this is new integration of layer ones. Even once you have a commitment from an exchange to integrate it, takes a long time. Like timelines of 9 months or longer is not unusual. And that's because of the extra development time, development effort that's required to integrate and test new layer ones. The time frame for actually getting that started was the release of the Gateway API and the core node software, because that was actually now got to full production grade systems that are required for a tier 1, tier 2 exchange to do the integration in a way that customer funds are safe through the entire process and all this kind of stuff. Now, that's not to say you couldn't have done it against the previous APIs, and there were a number of integrations that were done, but it was a lot harder. And so the amount of engineering effort for that was even higher. We've managed to lower that, which is awesome, but expectation setting, new layer ones take time to integrate. This is the start of the race. Yes, we are continuing these conversations. Yes, we understand how strategically important they are. But yeah, this is not something that happens quickly.
And to follow in something you said, Adam, about sort of the business decision wraps around this, sort of like which integrations are the point in our timeline of various integrations might happen. I mean, I think on wallets in particular, there's a conversation that we have with wallet providers about the fact that particularly for wallet interfaces, the interface to the network is going to change quite a bit at Babylon, and so there's a decision that they have to make about sort of like, hey, do we do this integration right now and then make that shift when it happens, or do we focus on Babylon? So in some way, like we're really focused. I think correct me if I'm off base on this, but I think we're really focused on exchanges because that's the thing that absolutely makes sense. Perfect sense right now for the network. We need to get that in place. I think a lot of these other third-party integrations is a little bit more of like a business judgment about sort of, do we wait until DeFi ready Radix after Babylon releases? But but again, as you pointed out, Adam, it's like these are different conversations that we're willing to have with people.
And on mobile wallets specifically, I know we've said on one of the previous roundtables, but for Olympia, RDX Works is not going to be creating a mobile wallet. We absolutely will be creating a mobile wallet, which is completely DeFi oriented for Babylon, and we expect it to be a unlike anything you've seen before, and one of these blow the top of your head off type of products.
Yeah. No more to say on that for the time being.
No more to say about that.
There's a lot of competition in crypto for developers. What are the next steps with Scrypto and onboarding skilled devs?
Yes, onboarding skilled devs. This is building the movement of devs. This is I kind of alluded to this earlier, but obviously this is really the focus of what we're trying to do right now. Like right now, since we've delivered Alexandria, the thing to get excited about is exactly this, about how do we build a community of developers. And I'd even expand it. I mean, you say skilled developers, and certainly that's, I think, we find that we have a certain appeal to skilled developers who have enough perspective to see the kinds of advantage that Scrypto provides. And, maybe they've got a little bit more confidence to be thinking about, hey, I might actually launch something on the network when Babylon launches and so forth like that. But the other thing we're found is that I think even sort of your more novice developer is also really interesting for this, because I think we have lowered the bar quite a bit. And I think young devs and people that are new to the space that are coming in are still really valuable long-term investments in the platform because they become the next generation. Everything isn't about sort of like, well, how do we get something launched right away? It's like if you get a community of people that even if they're just beginners, even if they don't launch a business for 5 years down the road on Radix, what they are doing if they get excited is they're participating in the communities, they're helping other people come up to speed, they're building enthusiasm, and they might build smaller scale things that help other people and serve as the basis for other work. So it's, in our opinion, it's all important. So next steps. I mean, I kind of mentioned this already. We've built a base of educational materials that we're going to continue to build up. That gives us a foundation that allows us to we can start leveraging those educational materials into a lot of different forms. We can run, remote hackathons. We can run some in-person sessions that I think are going to be mostly focused around education, about saying, go to a certain city that has a lot of developers and let's draw people together and educate them on why Scrypto is a different way of going about things. I think we now also with Alexandria have the ability of starting to reach out to, speaking of skilled developers, reaching out to communities like existing communities like the Rust community that obviously are, they have a little bit of an advantage up the learning curve because they already have that syntax in their head. And so all you really need to do is get it to click on the asset oriented way of doing things for a public ledger. And we found that click happens with people and they it's an eye-opening experience for them. So, next steps are starting to run those events. It's reaching out, conducting the educational stuff, continuing to build up our basis of materials so that it's all about momentum building. It's all about getting people into the community and contributing code and contributing enthusiasm.
And on that side, like the big thing about this is also knowing which things make the difference. And being able to monitor that. So a big part from kind of the marketing and strategy side, we even had a shared workshop with the product team last week about this concept of is there builders? Like, where is the proof of builders on Radix and that we're going in the right direction? How do we measure that? How do we track it? How do we see the impact of different activities we have on actually driving what we think are the key factors to having a successful developer community and then a successful ecosystem being built on Radix? And it's something which takes a lot of time and effort. There's different channels we can go to. As Matt said, the existing Rust community, you can go and present them, up and coming kind of younger talent in the space, even people who are really interested in DeFi but maybe haven't actually done any DeFi development yet. We can go and reach out to those people, and there's different platforms and mediums where you can reach them, different messages, and they have different journeys. And a lot of this is one about the community itself and the developers community itself learning what that journey looks like and where they want to get involved, but also RDX Works understanding which of these channels and which of these things are most valuable to getting this budding community and ecosystem really ramping up.
Yeah, that's how we're going to be competitive against other, if you're talking about the competition for developer attention, that's how you win, is just being really, effective in figuring out what's really effective at reaching people. Like, we feel like we've got the product. I mean, we've talked to enough developers that we feel like if we can get this idea, that we've got, if we can get that into their head, they become believers. So the question is, what's the most effective way of doing that with the largest number of people? And this is where metrics come into it and all these other programs that we want to run.
Yeah, I think this sort of like runs into the difference between marketing without intent and marketing with intent. Like, it's very easy to spend large amounts of money on marketing and do nothing, because if you don't actually know who your audience is and what you're measuring for success, it's basically you're basically throwing money up a wall. The main thing that
and we've seen a lot of people throwing that money and not being successful with developers. Like, that doesn't solve the problem.
Right. I mean, this has happened repeatedly. Like, the developer community, the developer marketplace is some of the most, like, for many reasons, it is some of the most difficult to reach people, because they are highly technically savvy. They are very skeptical about marketing hype, generally speaking. They are also in the socioeconomic demographic that most marketers want to reach. They tend to be young and wealthy. And so, like, there's lots of reasons why marketing to them is expensive. There's lots of reasons why marketing to them badly is ineffective, and it can actually be damaging to your brand and your brand legitimacy. And there's lots of reasons that you need to think about very carefully what the message is. And then even once you've got the message, you have to be really careful to define what success is, because what we want, right? What the entire strategy for Radix long term is to build a world-beating ecosystem on top of Radix with a world-beating set of decentralized finance applications that provide an incredible amount of choice and possibility both for the developer and for the user. But to get there, you have to work out the intermediate measures that make you most likely to get success there. And it's, weirdly enough, it's not things like number of lines of code or like number of stars on GitHub or whatever. So like it's really there's lots of thinking that goes here, and a lot of our experimentation at the moment is just working out what connects with the things that are most important for growth long term.
And that does change over time as well, though, Piers.
And it changes over, yes, 100% changes over time. So like your as your audience gets more mature and more educated, for sure, it changes over time. The thing that I think is most interesting about this competition for skilled developers or for developers full stop is that Radix is taking a radically different path here. Like the competition in the rest of the crypto ecosystem is essentially the competition for Solidity developers, either the creation of Solidity developers, which very few people seem to actually help with. Most people are like, oh, once you can learn Solidity, come build on Avalanche. But there's only 16,000 of them, so all of this money is chasing a very, very small number of developers in the first place. And I don't think anyone has really seems to own the job of getting developers into the space in the sort of the Solidity world, or they just assume Ethereum's doing a good job of it, which, by the way, it's not. 16,000 is a awful number after 5 years of this programming language being in the world, and that's because while 500,000 developers by some estimations have given it a try, only 16,000 are still there. Like, that's insane. So what there is is 20 million developers who have heard about Web3 and have heard about DeFi and don't know what it is. And what a lot of people in the crypto space seem to think a lot of the time is that the first thing you have to show a developer is how much money they're going to make. The people are just money orientated, and as soon as they hear about DeFi, they're like, cool, how do I launch my next $1 billion application? But most people's learning process doesn't look like that. Most people's learning process is, I have to understand enough of the context of the thing for me to be able to make decisions in the first place. I have to understand the basis for what this new industry is, right? And developers uniquely, everyone has a way of approaching problems and a way of approaching learning new things. And a lot of developers tend to think in code. It's their tool in which they think most deeply. And so what you tend to get is, to understand this Web3 thing, to understand this crypto thing, to understand this DeFi thing, I'm just going to try and build something. And actually, one of the blog posts that was viral recently was this person saying, the problem with Web3, and if you read it, it was all about his experience of actually trying to build these things in the first place, because that's how he thinks, right? Now, what Scrypto is the best possible way to think in a DeFi manner, to think in an asset orientated manner. Radix is creating this entirely new paradigm of asset oriented programming, and that means that you can now you can move around assets as native features of the programming language. But it's also the best possible way of learning how to build, or what DeFi is, like what the Web3 space is. So what we look at as our goal over the next year is creating these incredibly easy ways in which developers can come up a learning curve to understand why they should even be interested in this space, to look at the 20 million developers who are interested in getting into it rather than the 16,000 who are already in it. So, I'm going to now go on to the next question, which is, why doesn't the team address the detailed design proposals people post in Discord? Russell.
I will take this one, and I will preface it by saying we absolutely read all of them, and discuss them and in some cases go, hey, that kind of lines up with what we're thinking, or does not in this area. And I also want to say, I understand how it can be frustrating if you put all this time into, hey, I wrote up this 3-page PDF on a proposal, and where's my detailed response on it? And the answer is really that the team has to make sure the technical staff are spending their time on the things that have the most, like when in a community, that has the most impact to that community. And getting into a detailed technical response, which requires a huge amount of background knowledge on the subject, is something that will be understood by very few of the readers in those channels. And so the team might have gone through many hours to go respond point by point to, say, an architecture design, and 4 people found that helpful, and everyone else just said, oh, okay, I guess they're saying there's some problems with it. So that's the biggest challenge to getting into detailed response to that, is just that there's an enormous amount of background information that's important in order to be able to effectively talk about and communicate why certain aspects of a design are good or don't fit our roadmap or anything like that. So my suggestion for everyone when they have a thought of the way things should be done is start with the use case. You'll see us doing this a lot if you are in the Scrypto channel, of rather than saying, hey, I think it would be a good design that would generically enable a bunch of cool stuff to do this. Start with, I wish to accomplish the following. And under current design, that does not seem possible. Could this be accomplished? And it literally, here's my specific use case. I'm trying to have an application that does the following, and I can't see a way to get to that goal. If you come at it in those terms, it's much easier for us to look at it and say, oh, that could be achieved by the following way, which doesn't require a new design, which then saves you days or weeks of trying to think through a design to architecturally change things. And it also lets us present it in a way that everybody who's reading the channel can also, be oh, that sounds like a good use case. I also would like to do that. And they can follow along with what the response is and why it's possible. Or sometimes it might say, yes, we would like to enable that. And we think there's a way, but it can't be done right now.
And this is literally how we talk about this stuff inside the team too. Like, we are never approaching development. It's sort of like, all right, here's the list of features that we know we need, and how do we go about building them? It's always, what are we trying to accomplish? And so particularly on Scrypto stuff, like a lot of times the use cases that people do surface in the channels enters directly into our own thinking about like, hey, how are we going to address this case? This seems like a really good use case. We need to make sure that gets covered in this overall architecture. The implementation is where it gets really sticky, because you have to kind of balance like, well, we want to do these things, but we know that, a year from now we're going to be in this place, and so maybe the form of implementation really changes. But the use case stuff is really valuable, and we absolutely read that stuff.
Yep. I wish I had like a secret word we could just say that was known for, oh, this is a very deep question. This is why you're not going to get a detailed response on it, because it will take hundreds of hours. So we just need some sunflower. If you see sunflower, that means, sorry, this is a sunflower issue. We can't have Josh go spend 16 hours on this.
But yeah, I think this is actually a really important point, because it's how I started. It's one of the big mistakes I made early in Radix, is that Dan and I would sit down and have conversations about technical decisions, and I would have abstract questions about like changing implementation, and actually, my understanding of it, while I like to think of myself as not an idiot, was nowhere near what it needed to be to actually be able to contribute at a technical level, because I didn't understand all of the complexities that Dan was juggling, and that's often true, not always. Like, there are obviously some incredibly technically savvy people, incredibly intelligent people in our community, far better than me at this, but like, I found it much easier to talk about when I'd be like, oh, I think this is going to be really important from a commercial point of view. I think this is going to be really important from a product point of view. And it completely changed the nature of our conversations, because Dan would just be like, oh, that's easy. You just do this. And I'd be like, and all of the like crazy, like system thinking that I had in my head that I thought I understand how the system went just went out the window, because it was just like, oh, just do this. Oh, okay, cool. Excellent. Next thing. What are you going to say, Adam?
I was just going to say that we need to get Russ a custom Radix sunflower emoji in Discord.
And then communicate. This is what it means when you see the sunflower.
Yep.
Okay. Last question. Question from Reddit. What is your vision on the future of DeFi, and what do you see as the biggest risks? Matt, why don't you start with that?
Yeah, this is one that's been on my mind recently, particularly from the view of like, what are we talking about when we say building a DeFi platform? When you talk about the future of DeFi, like the thing that just kind of as a quick little anecdote, we've had a bunch of questions from people saying like, hey, is Radix going to support Web3? And my reaction to that is always like, what do you mean by Web3 exactly? And so I don't know if people noticed, but there was this little survey we snuck out recently that was sort of like, it was a one-line question of like, what is Web3? And we got actually a bunch of responses, and it was really interesting. And it kind of confirmed what I suspected, which is like, people actually have a lot of different ideas about what this thing is. It's not one notion. But the interesting thing to me is that there is sort of it feels like there's this common unconscious concept that the world is starting to awaken to, and it's causing, and it gets expressed in different terms in different places, kind of depending on everyone's perspective of what they find important. But it's when you talk, like, to me, like DeFi, Web3, even the metaverse, like these are all kind of, I think, have like a 90% overlap between them. At the fringes, people have kind of particular ideas about where they go, but really there is this common notion of moving to, and again, this is my opinion on it, because if you're asking about the future of this, like to me, the big thing that's happening here is this notion of self-sovereign ownership and self-sovereign control. And that underpins a lot of these other ideas. Like when you talk about the metaverse, even, it's like, well, what is the metaverse? Well, we actually already have all these little independent universes. It could be World of Warcraft. It could be a simulated city. It could be Twitter. Like these are all, if you think about it, universes. But the metaverse idea that I think seems to be gathering steam is stitching those things together. Well, how do you stitch those things together? It's by ownership. And ownership is really this concept, the idea that you need to be able to carry, I need to be able to carry a representation of my identity or my money or whatever it is from one universe to another verse. And once you have that, you have a notion of a metaverse that actually is useful. This even gets to like data, when you talk about, digital twins of cities and things like that, like you need to have data and ownership that kind of is portable between systems. So it's the same thing with DeFi. Like to me, the reason why we've settled on DeFi is, to me, that's the closest concept to the thing that a decentralized ledger like Radix can do in this ecosystem is providing a reliable democratic ownership layer for assets and identity and all these things. And so, unfortunately, DeFi also carries these connotations of like, well, what people start narrowing down to like DeFi is like, well, it's just the things happening in DeFi today, or finance itself feels like, well, okay, it's just going to be banks and that, or the alternative to banks. Whereas to me, DeFi is, if you have an in-game economy in a massively in an online game, that in-game economy, if you have the ability of carrying ownership outside that game, becomes DeFi. And the same mechanisms that you built for a totally boring financial system, you could apply to the in-game economy in a game. So to me, there's this is the exciting thing that everyone's awakening to, is that all this stuff stitches together. And so we picked DeFi because we felt like that was the most central term, but really it's like it's Web3, it's the metaverse, it's all these things. And I think the potential for that concept, this idea of democratized ownership and tying together these different things and having some notion that I can carry these things between different applications and universes I interact with, that has a lot of potential, but it's going to take a long time. Like the barriers to this right now is like the user experience for this really sucks, even when you're staying within a fairly narrow set of applications. So the idea of like, well, you want to be able to carry an asset across these different representations, these different networks, is like that. That's a whole other level of user experience problem. And it's going to take a very long time for that to be explored, but it really is holding things back. In fact, this is one, again, to allude to the wallet concept we're working on, like this is where we are actually putting a lot of thinking into what does the total integrated user experience for a platform like Radix need to look like to be able to serve as the basis for this big vision that I'm talking about for the future. If we believe that Radix is going to underpin this kind of system by having ownership, what does it need from not just a technology point of view, but the ability to create things on that platform as well as the user experience of it? So I think it's very embryonic right now. There's lots of things holding it back, from scalability, which is the one that kind of tends to be everyone's mind from a technologist point of view, but it's also the fact that it needs to be not just acceptable to build on it, but it needs to like actively enable building of really wonderful things in that kind of new system. And this is what Scrypto is about. So, that's my view on it. It's a lot of potential, but I mean, this is why Radix exists, is to solve this problem, to be able to meet that long-term potential.
And solving a problem is one of the things that we always have in mind. Like, what is the end state, and work backwards from that. Many projects going like, well, what's the immediate problem? And if we solve that, we get one step further along the road. And then we solve the next problem, we get one step further along the road. And one of the things that really is so inspiring working at Radix is, even from the very start, with like when Dan looked at DLT technology and blockchain technology, it's like, work backwards. If this was a global scaled system, what would it need to, how would that work? What would that look like? What do we need to consider and get in place now? And the vision of DeFi, and ultimately Radix as well, is that the global financial system has about $400 trillion of value in it. And that is just with what is there today. And when you're talking about things like NFTs, the metaverse, in-game economies that could all suddenly become part of this global financial system, if it's running on DeFi, suddenly that $400 trillion doesn't even encompass that. So
it's like new kinds of ownership that didn't exist before that you can now express on this kind of open ledger, which is super exciting.
It's like, and it's coming from CES, like one of the things that I get asked a lot is like, oh, well, how does this work? And like, with banks, is it like, is DeFi competing with banks? And it's like, well, it's just a different way of setting it up, just in the same way as like, did the internet destroy newspapers? Well, some sprung up, and then we also got YouTube. YouTube wasn't possible with a printing press. And this is now like, who thought there'd be vloggers? Like, there's this whole massive expanse of things.
Justin TV thought there'd be vloggers.
Before the internet, did they? But yeah, it's like this whole massive thing where, and like, it's my favorite slide we've ever produced is the one Matt, was it Matt or you, Piers, that did the like DeFi today 200 billion is this like tiny square, and then like 400 trillion. Yeah.
That was Piers, yeah.
It's like the Jeff Bezos, you've got $1 million, it's a grain of rice. This is how many grains of rice just like Jeff Bezos has. It's like, that's a concept your brain just is blown away by. So yeah, that's the vision. And as Matt said, the biggest challenge is that we are in the innovator stage. We're not even at the point where MySpace thinks everyone should have a profile song, like, and realize that wasn't the smartest move. Like, we've not even got there yet. So lots to learn.
Yeah, and I don't think that there are, like, what do you think see as the biggest risks? There isn't at this stage. I don't think there is anything that could fundamentally take down DeFi. Like, decentralized finance will adapt to whatever the roadblocks that come down the road are, and be that, sort of regulation, or be that increased consumer protection, or any of those things. Like, that is just part of now taking into account the full ecosystem that is necessary to replace traditional systems for financial products with a better way of doing things. But like, for it to work with the real world, it has to integrate with the real world. It is not separate to, aloof from, or like it wants to integrate with society. It wants to integrate with the mass market. It wants to be part of our everyday. And for that to happen, there's a bunch of stuff that it has to be able to do, and that will come in time. Like, but at the base of it, it is a system for the efficient allocation of capital. And if you have a way of making assets programmable, and if you have a way of them instantly moving between opportunities, and you have a way of creating objects and incredibly complicated organizations that all interact on this same like layer that is supranational and incredibly resilient and robust, then you have something like that potentially changes human history in the same way that the internet does, and I think that momentum is already there.
It becomes inevitable. It's just there's too much of a gravitational pull towards that. It's a matter of what's the road to get there and what form does it take, but it's going to happen.
Right. So like I think that everyone can look back at this time and be proud to be early backers of DeFi, and be proud to be early community members of the space. Like, in many ways, the thing that excites me is not so much that any one company or any one organization is going to be the winner here. It's that we are in a state of becoming, and that we are all helping that happen. And if you are motivated by being a builder and being part of that movement, then you are in one of the most exciting like collective endeavors of human history that's going to ever happen in our lifetime. And so I think that is, for me, the hurdles that come there'll be many challenges, but I think that that's the ultimately thing that excites me.
And the people that are in right now are the people that get to have the fun of exploring all the things that you could never do with the system before. It's like when you talk about the efficient allocation of capital, it's again one of these things where like this is a very broad concept. Like that you could use that exact term to refer to a really cool set of NFTs. Like that is efficient allocation of capital, because basically this person has produced something which has caught the minds of people, and that has value. And so like we're now creating systems where value can flow to the creators of these kinds of things. It starts pulling in, before, if you wanted to be an artist that was participating in the financial system at large, you basically had to be one of a handful of really big name artists that like had the alliances with the big galleries, and they became, and basically rich people start sort of using you as a mechanism for storing wealth and so forth. Well, now this is everybody. Like now this is like you have things of value that can be down to a much granular level, which means that everyone can participate in it. And these platforms today are where you can start experimenting with what all that really means, that you could never do that before.
And
it's like the early days of the internet.
Yeah, it's all going to be great stories. If you talk to anyone who was in the early days of the internet, they've all got great stories, even if they backed the wrong horse. Right. Like they still got great stories because they were part of something that ultimately changed the world.
Russell still frequently cites an early website from the internet that exists for some reason. What was it called, Russell?
Zombo.com?
Zombo.com.
Yep.
Zombo. Welcome to Zombo.
Don't know why it still exists, but it does.
Because it's one of the greatest things ever produced from a single mind.
It captured the zeitgeist of like 1998 or so.
Really did.
All right, I'm gonna close that out on Zombo.com. If you have never heard of it,
I don't think the site itself still exists, but the YouTube record of it does exist. Maybe it does. I don't know.
I think the website still exists.
It's still there.
It's still there. All right. Thank you very much, everyone. And looking forward to chatting again next month, where we will have a new face amongst us as well.
That's right.
I'll have to awkwardly fit 5 faces into the frame.
Tiling problem.
Thank you very much.